Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, lovely people. This is Marie Alessi and Tanya Unkovich with yet another Up Spiral Brief interview. And I'm really excited about this because Tanya and I had to swap dates a couple of times because you weren't feeling too well. So I'm really, really happy to see you here live and well. And we've got some really, really beautiful things to share. And before we get started, I just wanted to quickly do the usual and tell you how we actually connected. So Tanya and I met on LinkedIn, and I love that these days I meet more and more people in the space of LinkedIn, because LinkedIn has gone more and more personal over the last couple of years, I've noticed, which I really love, because we are all human beings behind our LinkedIn profile. And I just really love how that comes out more and more. So Tanya, it was such a delight to meet you because you work in quite a similar space to me. And I just love broadening both our networks. And I was so looking forward to introducing you to our audience. So would you do us the honor and share a little bit about you, please? Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. And yes, lovely to connect. And you're so right, isn't it? LinkedIn is becoming more personal. And for those of us who tend to do that a bit more, it's actually really nice. And I notice that people really do respond to that. Well, I've got my background is wide and varied, actually. My background is actually commerce. I'm an accountant by trade. But in my 30s, I started having grief really knock on my door. You know, close people were starting to get cancer, and then I had the infertility struggles. And then my husband passed away at 40. So it was during that time that I really transitioned into life coaching, counseling, and things like that. And as the years went on, going through such a big bereavement, you really have to go back in and find out, who am I again? What am I here in the world for? So that's why I started doing so much more speaking and then writing the books and life coaching. So yes, a very wide and varied background, and it continues.
Yeah. Tanya, I am so touched by your story. You know, I'm very lucky, I have to say, that I come across so many people that are so inspiring in the space of grief and have chosen to go a very different route to what society often suggests. You know, society often gives you when you're grieving, this is almost like your life is over sentence. You know, this will always stick with you and your life will never be the same. I always come for that space. Well, of course, my life won't be the same. You know, like adversity very often sends us in a different direction, yet what we make of it can be so life-changing for other people as well as our own life. So I could see that in your life quite tremendously, because you just threw that all in, in one breath, basically. I'm like, wow, there is so much grief that you experienced in your life with your journey of infertility and then your husband at such a young age. Can we delve a little bit deeper into the story, because this was such a wow, so much in one sentence, and I'd like to explore it a little bit so that our audience can follow along as well. How on earth did you actually deal with that, and how did you come out on the other end, shining your light so brightly and really leading a path into healing? Basically, I'd really love to hear your story in a little bit more detail.
Yeah,
as
sure.
much as you like to share.
Yeah, no, I'm quite an open book, as you'll see in some of my books. You know what I think? As you were talking, I was thinking about acceptance, and I learned about acceptance at a very young age. I had food issues, eating issues, and body image issues, and that is a really tough thing to get through, to just work through the shame of that. And the way I started healing through that, a lot of it was around acceptance of who I am, acceptance of life, acceptance of what happens. And when the infertility thing started happening, for a start, I never expected it. I just assumed Phil and I would have babies as soon as we got married. And for the entire 8 years of our marriage, we tried to have children. And the grief was that deep that it was what made me go and study to be a therapist. And I think I just did that so I could heal, because the grief was so raw. And interestingly, during that time, my father got cancer, then my mother got cancer, and all these family members around us on Phil's side started dying of cancer. And Phil and I became this couple that everyone came to, and got support from, and we helped people through their journey as we were going through the whole infertility journey. And then I turned 40 and I said to Phil, I'm just going to give up. If it's not meant to be for us to have children, then I'm going to get on with my life and do something else, really do something with this journey. And he was literally diagnosed 3 months after my 40th birthday, and he died 5 months later of a very aggressive cancer.
Yeah.
And that was when I knew that, wow, there's a bigger plan for me in the world, and I'm not going to fall over and end my life. When I say end my life, not live my life. And what really helped me was, what would Phil want for me, and what would I want for Phil if the roles were reversed? So I made the decision to make meaning and purpose out of my journey, my suffering, and to just trust in whatever's greater than me out there, that there will be a path for me. And that was when I decided to write the books. That was when I decided to start speaking about it, and then delved a bit more into life coaching. So I mixed the finance and the life coaching, interestingly. Yeah. And, since then, I've just sort of done what has been put in front of me in order to be an example to mankind on how to move forward, live again. I don't like to use the word move on, but in a way it is. You do.
Yeah.
Even though the grief always revisits. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just depending on your language. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you say that language, because I've noticed you and I have got such similar language. And I think that's what really drew me to you, because you've got such positive language. And I feel just like you that we really needed that positive language in grief, because the grief language is really not positive whatsoever. And I'm also a very big supporter and advocate of changing the language in grief. And when you talk about acceptance, I actually want to delve a little bit deeper into that with you in a minute. But the acceptance of it, and the moving on, I really don't like that either. It's more like a moving forward, but there's also that, it's a weird language around that, but that when you talk about the role reversal, what would my husband want from me? What would I want for him if I was in his place? And I really love that Rob and I had the opportunity to talk about that. Did Phil and you use that chance that you were given? I know it was very aggressive and very fast for Phil. Did you have the chance to actually talk about that? What would you want for him? What did he want for you? You didn't.
Funny, he didn't want to talk about anything like that. And at times I found that difficult. But I had a great therapist actually at the time, but I also had this deep knowing to allow Phil to live his final act the way he wanted to. This was not about me. And I wanted to respect his desire. And it was his desire to live in hope.
Yeah.
And he didn't even acknowledge that he was going to pass away until his final day.
Yeah.
And that was his journey. And at times after he died, I remember thinking so often, should I have forced it? Should I have really made him talk about it? And I heard Lauren Bacall, interestingly, being interviewed by Larry King one day, and she said, the person who is going through the end stage of their life, it is their call, it is their journey. They write the script. And I just so agree with that. And in hindsight, I still agree with that. I absolutely do. It was not about me. It was about him. So in answer to your question, no, we didn't talk about things. And in the slightest times he would go, I really thought I was going to live longer. But then we'd both go into this place of hope. We didn't want to go into that. We just wanted to live in hope. And that was how it was for us. Everyone's journey is different.
Yeah. And I so appreciate that. And I also want to say, just from my perspective, sitting here listening to your story, there is so much love in this, that it's such a sign of love that you gave him the space to do it the way he needed it. And that really speaks for you. That speaks for the love that you both had for each other, that love and respect of this is his journey. This is his final stage and he needs to decide how he lives that. This is really beautiful. I want to say kudos to you, because yes, from our perspective, there would be that, but I need to know, but I want to know, but I want to talk about it. Yet for you to sit back and say, you know what, this is his decision, this is his choice, how he wants to live that speaks from such a space of love. And I just want to say, you know, kudos to you. This is absolutely beautiful to really step back and let him have that. Which brings me back to that topic of acceptance, you know, because it is such an easy way to say, well, we need to work on our acceptance and body image, all these you know, resilience lessons that you had in your life. How did you get to this space of acceptance? How did you get to the space of learning to accept things that you can't change? Because this is incredible once we've learned it, but when we don't, you know, how do you even get to that? Because I can only imagine how many people will be watching this interview right now going like, okay, sounds great, but how on earth do I get there? Have you got some tips for our audience here?
Well, you know, I look back at the whole eating issues and the body image issues, which started when I was 14. And I look back now and I go, what a gift that has been, even though it's been such a difficult journey. I don't wish it upon anyone, but in hindsight, what a gift it has been for me, because there probably was a lot of maturity in me, because at 16, without talking to anyone, I found a therapist and went and knocked on his door and said to him, something's not right with me. I know this is not normal. So here I was at 16 talking about issues that I talk with people now who are in their 40s. So, you know, I did that. And then at 18, my sister-in-law at the time said, hey, I've found a place where you can go and get help. And it was a 12-step program, and I started there. I found some great people around me. And whilst it's not something that I've stuck with all of my life, it is something that enabled me to really grasp acceptance. And it was about acceptance of life, just, you know, living one day at a time. What is. What can I do about this right now? There's nothing I can do about that other person right now. What I can change is what's going on inside of me. So I'm lucky. I started learning those skills as an 18-year-old. And, you know, I'm not going to lie, I've got a really strong faith, and that has helped me too, to be able to go, well, what is meant for me in this lifetime is what is. And I believe that I can either turn into a suffering mess and choose to be in a place of suffering, or I can go, how can I help mankind with this that's been dealt to me, and turn it around and make meaning out of it. And it was a decision. This is what I'm going to do with it.
I love it. I love this so much, Tanya, because, you know, choice is so powerful in all of this, you know, the reminding ourselves where we do have choices. And way too often people look at where they feel they don't have a choice. You know, you didn't have a choice whether your husband would live or die. Yet you did have a big choice in how you responded to it and what you did with it. And what you did with it is so beautiful right now, because it shines the light for so many others. And that, I just think, is the most beautiful part, when we choose to do something with it to help others. And that's where the decision lies. That's where the choice lies. And I love that you say that. It needs us to make a decision, you know, and that is often the first start. It doesn't make, you know, that doesn't make journey any shorter, or, well, it makes it probably shorter, because you make the decision right there and right then. You could have gone a long way around. But it starts with that decision. And that to me is really so beautiful that you mentioned that. I need to ask you, when you, obviously, you know, this is amazing that at a 14-year-old, you knew that you needed help and that you went to get that on your own, that as an 18-year-old, you stepped into that 12-step program, sorry. And I would like to know how the skills that you learned in these early years, how they helped you through the grief of the infertility issues that had come up for you. That is a really big thing for a woman. How did you apply that?
Well, you know, at 15, I started journaling. And you know how people often talk about the power of journaling and the power of gratitude. I started doing that as a 15-year-old religiously. religiously. I'd write 2 or 3 pages a day. My journal was my friend. And so I'm certain that helped. And then I just understood the power of being able to not worry about tomorrow and the future, not stay stuck in the regrets and shame of the past, but learn to stay in the day that I'm in, stay in the moment that I'm in, stay in the hour that I'm in. And those skills were the skills I used to help me to stop using food for comfort. So for example, if you know how when people get into this terrible eating cycle and then you go, oh, I've blown it for the day, I may as well just keep binging all day or all weekend, and then I'll start on Monday. Well, I learned the skill very early that even if my morning wasn't so great with the food, I was able to go, no, I'm going to start my day right now again and make sure the rest of my day is good. So I've applied those skills in so many other areas of my life. And then, you know, it happened with the infertility. It was like, okay, sometimes the grief of not being able to get pregnant was terrible. Like every month you get hit with it, right? And it was like, oh, here we go again. I would just apply those same principles. Okay, Tan, what have you got good in your life? What is great about your life right now? Instead of focusing on what I wasn't having and what I wasn't getting, I made sure that I was able to embrace everything that was beautiful in my life. I had a wonderful marriage, a wonderful husband. We had a lovely home. We traveled. So I'd keep focusing on all those things. And that was how I got through. But again, it was a month at a time and then a day at a time during those days of intense grief because you grieve the babies that you so dreamed about growing up. You know, it's just a grief. And so I won't deny, I started studying to be a therapist. I think in going through the 12-step program and all the journaling, I became a bit of a junkie in my 20s with personal development books. And I used to travel a lot with the job I was in. And so I'd be overseas coming home with bag just full of all these self-help books. I just had mountains.
I can't think of anything better to be addicted to than self-help books.
It really was. And so I was quite obsessed with personal growth in my 20s. And have been all my life. So I'm sure that you know, just learning those skills and then studying to be a therapist in my 30s, in my mid 30s, and loving the whole topic around grief. But then there was a reason for that, you know, it was as if I had this apprenticeship for the big one that was going to hit me at 40.
Did you have that moment as well? I noticed that in my life, like in particular after Rob died, because he was not my first significant loss. My first very significant loss for me was my dad when I was 20. And then I lost some very close people along the way as well. And then of course, the second really largest one for me was my husband, no questions asked. But after Rob passed, I actually had this moment of full appreciation of my life path when I looked back and thought, this is incredible. I'm actually having goosebumps just thinking about it now. How everything that happened in my life from very early childhood and childhood trauma, etc., and then losing my dad, etc., to Rob's passing and the work that I do now, how all of that has prepared me for standing on that stage and shining the light, you know, and that to me was this huge part of also accepting that, not just the passing, but accepting the limelight, if that makes sense. Have you had a moment like that as well? Because it's not an easy one that you stand up there and go like, oh, you know, that's me now. I'm sort of the leader in that industry. And, you know, it sounds so easy to say that, but even that needs acceptance of in accepting that leadership position in that, because you're partially creating that, but also needing to accept that this is where you are right now. And there are people looking up to you and there are people following you and waiting to hear from you and receive solutions, receive healing, or receive tools from you to know how on earth do I cope with that in their darkest hours. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I know that you were the first Tony Robbins coach in New Zealand as well. So you've got all the tools there, you know, the life lessons and the education around it, how to actually deal with it. Can you share a little bit about that journey?
I always remind myself it's not about me.
Yeah.
And it's about everyone else. It is not about me showcasing me or my superpowers. It's about me enabling others to see their superpowers, to see their light. And, you know, just holding that mantra, it's not about me, enables me to stay humble. It enables me to stay on purpose, because there can be a real difficulty if you allow yourself to go like that and then rely on the external for your validation. That validation has to always come from within. I'd rather be on an even keel than like this, you know, and so whatever it takes to
But
just.
that is exactly what I'm talking about. That is that journey, you know, of coming, of learning that, of understanding that, and that acceptance part that is huge. And I love that you say that, because it's not about you. However, if you don't do the work, that work that you're just talking about, you know, to having this mantra, knowing what it is about, without doing that work, you're not going to make it up there. You're not going to stay up there. So that's exactly what I would like to hear from you. How did you get to that space? You know, because there's obviously a lot of training and a lot of acceptance and a lot of internal work to be able to stand up there knowing that it's not about you. But without you, they couldn't go there either. You know, there's this, you
it's
know,
a bit of
both
a
sides to
double-edged
the
sword,
coin.
isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I just lost my train of thought then for a moment. There has been a lot of internal work from the time I was 16. The work started, and I've been able to know and be driven not by a need, from a need of significance, of personal significance. Maybe once upon a time, yes, it was like, oh, this makes me important. The more you can put that aside and not have this huge need for significance and to be in control, but have your greatest needs as one of service, as one of contribution, and one of growth, personal growth. That is what enables me to stay that way. And every day to remind myself, I'm here to serve others. It's about legacy. It's to not rely on all that external or whatever it is, because some of it's not good either, in order for me to feel okay with me, you know. So it's a part of surrender. It's a part of letting go. It's about accepting whatever life has for me. I'll do it. And you just show me what needs to be done, and I'll do it. That's kind of how I operate. I just surrender every day. What's your will for me? What is it that I'm here for? You know?
Yeah,
Surrender.
absolutely. I love that. Surrender is such a big part of this entire journey. So tell us about your books, Tanya. How many are out there, and share a little bit about each of the stories of the books and what people can find in it.
Sure. Well, the first book is called Unplanned Journey, A Triumph in Life and Death. And this was actually the book that Phil wanted to write. Well, he was writing a book. When he was first diagnosed, he started journaling actually about 6 months before he was diagnosed, but it was all leadership stuff, you know, it was all very matter of fact. And then when he was diagnosed, I think that's how he processed what was going on for him. And his journaling became very deep, very self-reflected, a lot of prayer and meditation in his writing. And he said, this is going to be great for my book. He really wanted to write a book about his journey of hope. And even on the final day of his life, we were in the hospital, and he looked at me and says, make sure you bring my journal in tonight, Tan, because this will be great for my book. And about maybe a week or two after he died, I just knew to write the book for him. So when the time was right, I got his journals, got my journals, and the first half of the book is his journey from diagnosis to his passing. And the second half of the book is my journey for that first year of raw grief. And I'm pretty open in that book. I talk a lot about my issues and how the food came back and all that. So that's the first book. And when I was publishing that, I decided to create a workbook companion, which accompanies that book to help people through the grieving process. And they were published about 12 years ago, maybe 13 years ago. And I've been writing about resilience ever since then. And as life does, it kept handing me more and more things that I need to become resilient in. And the last little bit was the death of both of my parents in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
And so that's included a little their aging process. So the book is called From Grief to Greatness, The Art of Overcoming Adversity. And I talk about moving from a place of grief into finding your personal greatness on all levels, personally, professionally, legacy, spirituality. I talk a lot about that. That will be out in the next week or two. Fingers crossed it will be available on Amazon within a week or so. So I know it's being printed as we speak. And I've got another book coming out. I won't share the title of it. I'll share with you the you'll understand why when I share with you the cover, but it's very detailed about overcoming the food journey. It's about letting go and overcoming that journey and not being controlled and obsessed by food and dieting and weight and all that sort of stuff. So those two kind of go hand in hand, because what so many people do when they're going through the grieving process is they turn to food, alcohol, drugs, overspending, gambling, all sorts of things to run from the pain. So
and also to feel that emptiness that they feel, you know, and it's really interesting that you say that. I agree, because I remember that night when Rob passed away, and I drove to his family to tell them in person, because I thought this is no news that I want them to receive over the phone. And I remember the entire family coming together, and because, you know, the Italian background, the wine came out, and everybody, you know, the stories came out, and the tears. And I remember sitting in the living room, and they were all in the kitchen, and I just couldn't go there. I was so numb. And I made a decision there and then. I'm like, I do not want to be drinking at all for the next, I don't know how long. I didn't make a decision how long in that moment, but I got too worried, actually, that might become a go-to, that it might become this is easier if I numb that pain. And I knew in that moment that I wanted to be so present and so clear in my head and so just there for my boys. And I also knew I'm now the only designated driver, you know, if something was to happen, I need to be on 24/7. And it was such a conscious moment. I still remember that, thinking, making that decision that I don't want to drink for however long. As I said, you know, I did make a decision, and I did it for quite a few months, actually, because I just didn't feel like it. I just really wanted to be so present in that whole process, because I knew that that's what I needed. I needed me to be present for myself and the boys and the whole process and everything that was to come and all the decisions that I had to make. So that was quite interesting, actually. But I also know that there was a time in my life a few months later when I went traveling around the world where it's gone the complete polar opposite, not as in drinking, but also that eating food everywhere. And, you know, that my journey with weight went up and down, and until I actually actively did something about it and thought, you know what, I want to be healthy. It was another decision in my life that I made to counterbalance that. So I can't wait for that book to come out, because I'm really interested in that. Yeah. So, Tony, I just want to say, we will be sharing, I'm saying that to the audience here, everybody hanging on edge going like, where's the book? What's happening? So the book that's already out that you wrote 12, 13 years ago, we will be posting the link below the interview so you can find that. However, once the other book is From Grief to Greatness, when that comes out and is available on Amazon, I will make sure that we come back to this interview and share the link as well, because as you all know, anybody watching this in a group, you find all the interviews in the guide section. Anybody watching this on YouTube, we will come back to the YouTube link and share it in the comments below. So please make sure that you follow and subscribe, little ad on the side here, so you will get the updates as well. So I'll make sure that also the third book in the making will also be sent here as a link so people can actually find it. Tanya, I'm so grateful that you came here, because you are so full of wisdom when it comes to accepting and healing. And there's such a beautiful journey that you have had through the decisions that you made in your life. And I just love having had you here. So before we go, I would really bring that back to you and say, is there any final words of wisdom that you would like to share with our audience here?
We have a choice whether we want to live in a state of joy or in a state of suffering. And it doesn't mean that it has to be one or the other. It's about integrating both of them in life. And I did a post the other day on social media. I was walking and the sun was so shining. It was so bright, but it was also raining and I could see a rainbow, all three at the same time. And that's life. Embrace the grief, embrace the joy, and take every single precious day of your life and live it.
I am so grateful for that. Thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom here. I'm really so happy that we finally had the chance to talk on camera and share your journey here. So thank you so much for being here. And anyone who would like to connect with Tanya, we'll make sure that we'll be sharing a few links as well, so you can reach out to her or connect with her on LinkedIn. And Tanya, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you.
It's been great. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And this is Tanya and Marie signing off. Bye for now.
Bye for now.
Bye.